Superb. So there's always that moment before the red dot appears where I'm like, is technology going to do the thing and not do the thing? But it looks like it's doing it. So welcome, Melissa, and thank you so much for joining me on this week's episode of Coffee with Kofi. How
I'm
are you?
thrilled to be here, Kofi. Thanks for having me.
Grand, grand. And how are you doing on this glorious summer day?
It's absolutely stunning. I'm looking outside my window. The sun is shining, just enough clouds in the sky to make it interesting. So
Yeah.
looking forward to getting outside for a little vitamin D here shortly.
Yeah, no, I love it. I always try and carry my own sunshine, as I know you do too, but it does help when the external matches the internal. So
Absolutely.
brilliant, brilliant. Well, I know for both of us, we've got a little bit of time pressure, and there's so much. We could literally go on for like days in terms of
We
just our
definitely could.
general chat.
Yep.
But let's get into it. And so far as I guess in terms of the premise of these conversations, it's about talking to leaders who have heeded the call on purpose or by accident to sort of pivot their careers towards something that's meaningful to them, to their local communities, to society, and also the world at large. And I couldn't think of anyone better to talk to, having got to know you recently through Lee, thank Lee, than yourself, because yeah, we're in some tricky times, some interesting times, and
Yes.
I thought it'd be great to just hear a bit about your journey navigating your career. So, if I may, first of all, how does that all sit with you and sound? Is that what you signed up for?
That is exactly what I signed up for. Thank you very much. And hopefully there's no curveballs in here. But I think the questions we've talked about are exactly what I would want to talk about. So let's do
Great,
it.
great. So I'm gonna channel my inner Oprah, mixed with a bit of Louis Theroux, but less provocative, more supportive, and let's make it happen. So yeah, just starting with your background, knowing a little bit about that, I couldn't help but pick up a sense of adventure with you having spent some time in Texas, Norway, New York, and then now London, and not being one to cast blanket assessments. Many of my American friends don't tend to leave America, but let alone where they were sort of born and raised, but you have. So is it a fair assessment that you are possessing of some desire for adventure and travel generally?
Absolutely. So I think, I have my parents to thank for that, who were not the kind of people that would want to take us to Disney or, to new places and stay at a hotel. My parents were campers. They
Okay.
loved to camp. They loved to go in the great wild outdoors. And so as long as I can remember being a baby up until 16, 17, we had a camper and we would drive hours to different places in Texas, where I grew up,
Okay.
small town Texas, to Oklahoma, Arizona, Utah, New Mexico. All of our summers were spent in Colorado for 2 weeks, camping in the campgrounds, visiting, some of the Native American ruins. Got to go up to Mount Rushmore, Wyoming,
Oh.
Montana, South Dakota. They were very much squarely in the Southwest.
Mhm.
And the Western places, they liked the warm weather and the sun. They were not cold weather people. So trips to Colorado were only in the summer.
Yeah.
I actually didn't even get to ski until I moved up to New York in my 20s. But what that taught me was there's this great world out, beyond Wichita Falls, Texas, where I lived.
Mhm.
And when I was probably around 16 or 17, I started to notice, wow, there's other places outside the United States. In Texas, you learn years about Texas history before you're even exposed to US history. And then European and world history comes much later.
Got
And so
you.
starting to learn about, different parts of the world and different cultures and languages, it really piqued my interest. And
Mhm.
right when I was about to graduate, when you're in Texas, the whole class typically goes to Cancun. It is a
Mhm.
margarita fest at the beach. And my parents were like, over our dead body, are we sending our 17-year-old recent high school graduate to to Mexico without a chaperone? So my best friend and I, we found a trip sponsored by the Spanish Club to Spain, France, and England. And my parents were like, well, that sounds great. Are there chaperones? Yes, there's 2 chaperones.
Brilliant.
B, how do you plan to pay for this, Melissa? There's not a lot of extra money to just send you off to Europe for a couple of weeks. And I was already working at the Gap. I took on an additional job at a shoe store called The Buckle, and I
Okay.
saved the required thousands to go. And that trip was a life-defining moment for me. Absolutely fell in love with Europe, and I decided this is where I'm going to live one day. Like, Texas is too small for me. I've got to get out of here. I want to go see the great world and live and work. And so my entire view of my future at that point changed. And I switched from being an art history major to international business. Fell in love with Paris, so I chose French as my minor. And even though I went to school a couple hours away from my hometown, Texas Tech, I did the international business program. And my friendship group was the international business students from all different walks of life. Some of my closest friends are still Turkish and Moroccan and Spanish and English. And really appreciated that exposure that I think most people from a small town in Texas don't typically get. And I'm glad that I got, wanted to go find out what was the rest of the world like, because it has made my life more exciting, more adventurous than I could possibly imagine. So I did a study abroad in Norway. So now I have a lot of Scandinavian friends, and just kind of set myself on a path that I'm going to travel, see the world, no matter how I'm going to get there, I'm going to get there. And as of today, I've been to 45 countries, and I'm hoping to hit 50 here in the next few years. But I think my desire to learn about different cultures, different people, obviously the art, the architecture is very important to me as well. But that wanderlust, just never stopped, and I hope to grow. So yes, you're absolutely right. I'm a very adventurous person, and I want to basically see everything and take advantage of everything life has to offer before my short time on this planet comes to an end.
Yeah, it is infinitesimally small, and it's so strange because this is something we haven't spoken about before, and I don't know what it is, but I get this sense when I look at someone's LinkedIn profile or CV, things start coming to me, because I guess if the wanderlust wasn't there, I wouldn't have seen the New York, the London, etc. And the way you've kind of put it into context has been brilliant. And I skipped a little bit, but going back, you mentioned your sort of parents, but then you also talked about sort of Native American places that you went to, understanding the history of America a little bit. Where did your parents hail from? Like, if you go back into history, do you have a sense of their heritage and their backgrounds?
Well, like most Americans, we've all been starving to know, where are we from? So of course I've done the ancestry DNA. I know exactly, I can pinpoint how, what percentage of one kind of area of the world versus the other I am. And I am shockingly 50% from England, and kind of like the area of the UK. I've got 26% Scottish, got a little bit of French, a little bit of Dutch, a little bit of German. So I'm pretty much that European part of the world. So maybe it was something from a past life that's led me to want to live in London. It seems like it was a calling of some sort.
This is, you know what, I'm starting, people might say this is a bit rude, but I am starting to believe that there is some universal force field around us. And I felt this when I went to Rome. I haven't done my DNA test, and if you believe Denzel Washington in Gladiator 2, then there were black people in Rome way back when. But I've just felt this drawing to Rome, but also California of all places as well. So I might have to take you up on that. But it does make sense that there is something within you that kind of resonates with those places that you've been to, and they don't feel alien to you. So what a rich and diverse tapestry we've woven already. 45 countries, 50 on the agenda. Brilliant. And you've really sort of helped me with my understanding of where that came from. And then you talked a bit also about the call to study and shift from being an arts major to international business. And I could see, looking back, that your earlier career wasn't in what you're doing now, which is often the case. And you took 2 roles within investor relations, if I'm right. So what drew you into that field? Firstly, and then I guess it'd be great to understand what were the things that you enjoyed about those roles particularly.
Yeah, so I think, one of my favorite, quotes right now is, you can't be what you can't see. And I think that's so important in the line of work I've been doing, because I couldn't see anything other than maybe some TV shows about what I wanted my life to be like. My mom was a teacher. My father worked in the oil business. And when I was, speaking with the counselor, my mom was like, oh, you should become an educator, become a teacher. And I'm like, I mean, I think there's so many great professions, but teachers being at the top, like you don't get much better than being a teacher. And I just thought, wow, I don't think I'm up for that challenge. I don't think that's in me. But for me, getting to, and it's going to sound really silly, but I was watching, Sex and the City at 17 with my girlfriends and seeing the likes of Miranda, a lawyer, or Samantha, the PR publicist, living these amazing independent lives in New York City, great friendships, really killing it in their career, and living in a place like New York. I was just like, that's what I want to be. I want to be the high-powered executive where I walk in and the doorman opens my building and says, welcome in. My maiden name is Dixon. Welcome in, Miss Dixon. And so that's kind of what I set my sights on. So my last year of university, I was part of the International Business Society, and I was the director of socials and events. Anyone that knows me was like, of course you were. We planned a trip to New York City. And at that point, I was like, you know what? New York is going to be a great stepping stone. And that's going to get me to Europe eventually. And I got there and we met with, several Texas Tech alumni from JP Morgan, Bank of America. And that's when I was like, that's it. I need to be on Wall Street. Like, that's what I'm going to do. I have to get into the financial field. I have to find a way into Wall Street. And my career was definitely kind of taking some, turns. So I moved to New York. I had about $5,000 in my bank account. I knew somebody in Connecticut. And I was like, you know what? I've got a degree. I know how to bartend and wait tables. I've got $5,000. I'm going to be fine. And I look back, I'm like, wow, that was definitely a calculated risk. Not sure I'm that risky these days. But I got there and bartended for a couple months while I was looking for a job, and ended up at a VC-backed startup that was basically selling DHL, the small to mid-sized companies. And I was like, I can sell some DHL, no problem. And the reason I took the job is my territory was Wall Street, because I never did an internship, and I wish I had, but I was like, I'm not going to stay in Texas. So why would I do an internship here? I didn't have a longer term plan in mind, unfortunately, at that point, but started going from building to building, trying to convince these small business owners to switch from UPS and FedEx to DHL. And during that process, I ran into a woman who was the head of a broker dealer. She was from Georgia. She detected the hint of the Southern accent. She's like, honey, what are you doing selling DHL? I said, well, I want to get on Wall Street. I don't really know what my options are, how to get there. And she's like, look, I need someone in my operations department. I can start you at the seller, which is twice what I was making, on the commission-based DHL role. And can you start in a few weeks? And I said, absolutely. I have no idea what I'm going to do, what a broker dealer does. No clue. I'm just going to make it happen. And started there, and eventually moved over to another part of that company that was the investment banking side. And had started, it was a Chinese investment bank doing reverse mergers out of China, and was handling the corporate development, business development, and some of the investor relations for these companies that we were, needing to deal with, like the US markets. And during that time, I met an amazing woman named Brandy, who was my partner. She had her own investor relations practice. And she said, you seem to be good at this. Do you like this? Do you want to come work for me? I said, absolutely, let's do it. And so worked with her and really kind of got squarely into the field of investor relations, and had that as my career for another, 5 or 6 years. And what I loved about it, because I see IR really as two pieces. You've got the communication side, where you're doing the press releases, the earnings call scripts, helping with the annual report, really understanding from the leadership team, the CEO, CFO, what their, strategy and communication is from an investment thesis, and helping them craft that. But the part that I really liked, leveraging that sales part, was how do I get them in front of the fund managers? How do I get them in front of the sell side and the analysts? How do I expose, their and it's all micro and small cap companies I was working with. So it's not the blue chip stocks that you're thinking,
No.
oh, that could be fun. No, nobody ever heard of these companies, and the market caps were minimal. And so for me, it was kind of a challenge. Like, okay, I'm going to get this company X new investors. I'm going to get X new sell side coverage. And I loved the pitching. I loved going on the road shows with the CEOs and the CFOs. And it was just an incredible learning experience on how, certain hedge funds would, look based on their strategy at, the companies that I was repping. And it was a great experience. I loved my time in IR. And I think it was around, obviously 2008, 2009 was a little difficult time. And a recruiter reached out to me, probably around 2010, 2011. I was like, are you looking for something new? I said, sure. Send me something interesting. And that's when he sent me TIAA.
Oh, grand. And look, the journey that you've been on, you kind of articulate it so fluidly, but as is my Louis Theroux Oprah situation, when I probe into that a little bit more, it really speaks to not necessarily knowing the mode of transport to get you from A to B, but having an overall vision, and then almost, how can I put it, like going with the flow and seeing what pops up from, the conversations with like Brandy and the Southern lady from Atlanta who just took a shining to you and doubled your salary just in one conversation, and I think recently I've been speaking to students about, the future and find their path. And it's something that I can really, really connect with, that you don't always have to have every single step figured out. It's actually just Sex and the City may have been the vision, but on the way there, you got different opportunities and found different tools. And you had overall, I guess, the courage just to say, why not? Let's go and do this, because you could have talked yourself out of it. $5,000 is money still, but you could have said, what if it runs out? What if I don't find it? What if this and what if that? And then we wouldn't be talking now, because you'd be in Texas probably.
Well, I think it's having the faith in yourself to say, if they can do it, why can't I? And putting yourself like those goals and taking those, calculated risks, those steps towards reaching your goals, but not being so, closed off with your blinders on, without realizing that the opportunities that are being presented are the absolute ones you should say yes to. And, if I hadn't said yes to, I would say 90% of the things that were offered to me, I would have missed out on a really great career trajectory. And so if I think about the movie Yes Man with Jim Carrey, like there's something very special in my heart about that movie, because, life is too short to say no to everything, in my opinion.
Yeah. And as ever, there is always a balance, because we can do some things really well, but not everything. But I think when you strategically look at it from a point of view of, I don't know, maybe cost benefit analysis, or will this take me closer to my goal? Yes or no? Take the step, take that step. And I love these conversations for the personal stories that relate to theories that we may have heard of, but actually, if you hear someone else live it, like you've lived it, then it's kind of like, okay, next time someone says, how about this? I might say, what would Melissa do? And then do it. What would Melissa do? Perfect. So thank you so much for that. And so TIAA, what led you to pivot into the relationship management side of things? Because I guess you built a certain profile with certain skills, and then the relationship management side, different, but maybe similarities. But yeah, what led you there?
So TIAA, for those that aren't familiar, they're squarely based in the US. They are a pension fund provider to mostly nonprofit companies, a lot of university systems, hospital systems, and Fidelity, Vanguard are kind of their comps. And I used to walk by their office every day to get to the investor relations agency where I worked. And they had this big office on 3rd Avenue. So I knew they were a big deal. But because they're not at this point, this bank that you're seeing on the news, you're not seeing, them splashed over, CNBC and Squawk Box. I didn't really know too much about them, but the recruiter who contacted me said, look, TIA is a big company. There's, I think at that point, 8,000 people. They're growing. They've been around since 1918. Started by Andrew Carnegie, who used his own money to set up essentially the first teachers' pension fund in America. And with my mother being a teacher, like there's something that really resonated. Wow, like this was started to make sure that teachers who give their entire life to giving back to their community, that they are now able to retire with dignity, and they've got that savings vehicle to do that. And the recruiter said, look, this is not an investor relations job. You're going to be going into a department called strategic sourcing. You're going to be a relationship manager. It's going to be, kind of fluid in what you're going to be doing, but it's going to be a lot of supplier-based relationship management. And I interviewed, and I think they saw a lot of like transferable skill sets, and it's like, yeah, let's do it. So moved over, completely different industry, didn't know anything about strategic sourcing, learned very quickly. And when I say like, just say yes has been kind of where I've gotten to where I was. This experience, so 13 years at TIA and then at subsidiary Nuveen, saying yes got me to a career path that I've absolutely loved. And so being in sourcing, I started off as a relationship manager, and then my chief procurement officer just kept giving me different opportunities. Do you want to MC the supplier summit? Can you organize it? Can you get the speakers? Can you do the invitations? Can you event plan it? But also, will you MC it? And what was I, like 24, 25? And I was like, I don't like to public speak. I don't want to do this. And there was a part of me that was like, you should say no to this. You're going to bomb. And then I was like, nope, I am going to figure this out. I'm going to make it happen. And whether it was the smoothest MC you've ever seen, I can categorically say it was not. But, I had 3 other opportunities to do it again. So the last time I did, I would say I was pretty good at it. But during that time, he also said, the chief procurement officer, at that point, supplier diversity was really important, making sure that small to mid-sized companies that were owned by women, minorities, LGBTQ plus, veterans, people with disabilities, making sure that there was a level playing field so they could go in and bid for the same chunk of business that, the bigger, KPMGs, EYs, big consulting firms were bidding for. And so I kind of just took over the reporting piece because the sourcing manager that was doing it was like, I'm too busy. I can't do this anymore. And I had some capacity. So the CPO said, do you want to take this over? I said, sure. And then just taking over that metrics piece actually grew into this full blown program where, I was off at, supplier conferences, meeting with them, partnering with my sourcing managers to see how can we get this supplier into the RFP process so they can be considered as well. And really was able to grow from just kind of handling the metrics for like this, state and the federal reporting part of it to a really big, like best in class organization when it came to supplier diversity. Ended up building a team out. And then when I had a team to help me run this, I was then asked to take over the contingent workforce program, which was in sourcing at that time. So dealing with the suppliers, the staffing suppliers that were bringing us CWs to do, name the work, a lot of IT, of course. And during that position, partnered closely with my employment lawyer around ensuring that we were getting diverse slates of contingent workforce candidates. Because if you're hired as a CW, there's a pretty good chance after a couple of years, you're going to get converted to a full-time employee. And TIA, who was very focused on diversity at that time, wanted to make sure that the diverse slate was coming in, and then that would ultimately in turn, produce a diverse workforce. And so developed a CW diversity program to track and aggregate, the CWs and their kind of representation metrics, and partnered closely with the DE&I team on this. And when that employment lawyer became the new chief diversity officer, had a lunch with her. She said, what's next for you? And I wasn't used to just being so bold to be like, I want to work for you. I want to do DE&I. But she gave me that opening. What's next for you? And I felt my heart stop. Like, I really want this. I've been sourcing for 7 years. What's my next step? And I said, well, I'd love to come work on your team. And she said, I'm so glad that you said that. And I got the role. It was 2 levels above from a seniority perspective where I had been sitting and sourcing. So I went from a senior manager straight to a senior director. And again, just kept getting offered different things, whether it's from org shifts or just bigger, responsibilities, and just kept saying yes. And then got promoted to VP the next year. COVID hits, George Floyd happens, and we are so busy, trying to figure out how do we meet the, needs of a workforce that is, going, how are we going to handle this? How are we going to fix some of the issues that we're seeing amongst our population? But then our clients, our education, our universities, and some of the hospitals came to us and said, we don't have a big HR team. We don't have anybody at DE&I, and our employees are really upset what's going on in America right now. Can you help us? And so we devised a client engagement strategy where I was partnering with our, relationship managers on the institutional side and developed a consultative package free of charge just to bring to them and be like, this is just a value add what TIAA can do for you. And that was a great success. COVID starting to come to an end at this point, and someone sends me over this job rec to head up DE&I and CSR for Nuveen, the asset manager, and it's for Europe, and it's around Europe and APAC. And in my head, along the way over those 10, 15 years, in my head, I was still thinking, how am I going to get to Europe? There's going to be a way. And I was so happy at TIA, which was all US based. I had gotten married, I had 2 children, and you kind of lose track of some of your hopes and dreams,
New ones come in, right? So yeah.
And then it just realized this is serendipity. This is the right job. This is the right time. And packed the family up and moved to London in March 2022.
That is incredible. And again, the forensic part of my brain is saying, what a wealth of experience that you've built. If I take it from a broad view, I start with the bartendering because I think that I did it. It's probably why we get on.
Yeah.
We enjoy our drinking, but it allows you to meet so many different types of people in different conditions, from the just having a non-alcoholic beer to the other end of the spectrum, and manage people and read signs and also all of that good stuff. Then I move it into understanding really how organizations, corporations need to position themselves in order to gain interest from investors. When you're doing that IR piece and hitting the road, and these are not, blue chip stocks that everyone knows and everyone's clamoring over you. So you really got to understand what their USP is and how to make that make sense with owner founders or whatever you've got. And then you move into the data realm where you're really understanding the detail around how do we make things better. And that can be applied across any lens. It just so happens to be around a lens that is close to our hearts, but diversity of suppliers, of contingent workforce. And all along, wow, you've underlaid that with the procurement expertise and the knowledge of the employment law side. So I'm seeing like relationship management, business understanding, stakeholder management, data knowledge, law, and then the whole DE&I umbrella coming together in this amazing package. And then you fly over to Europe and do your thing. That's wow, really. Like I don't think you could have written that plan, really.
I don't think little Melissa at University in Texas Tech ever would have imagined a journey like this. And again, I just go back to thank goodness I said yes, because I knew everything I was offered was going to get me one step closer. Didn't know how it was going to happen, but it was a good opportunity, and I knew I could, leverage it, parlay it into something else.
That's so powerful. And so you came over to Europe with Nuveen, I definitely know, and I'm sure we talked about this way before we would have been in similar rooms. We must have been.
Yeah.
But in that role, that was heading up inclusion, diversity, equity, as well as the CSR piece as well.
Mm-hmm.
Brilliant. And I think from my nosiness, were there any particular highlights from your time there? Because I know that's recently come to an end for you, but were there any particular highlights, not just being in Europe and being close to your spiritual home, but any particular highlights from a professional standpoint from that?
Yeah, absolutely. Working, we had two charity committees I was in charge of organizing and running, and one was for Europe, one was for APAC. And getting to know, because we had 5 different countries that were sitting on that charity committee in APAC, getting to understand those cultures and the way that they functioned. That was exposure other than the Chinese investment bank that I had worked at, but getting to know how Japan worked and kind of Australia worked and Singapore. It was all very fascinating. And then of course, the other European countries from the European side, dealing with their German colleagues and Austrian and Polish. And I mean, you can say people are people, but I think the people at that company were truly special, and how much they wanted to give back. And I will definitely take that with me about what incredible people Nuveen has working around the world, and how really altruistic they are and how inclusive they are. I think from a professional perspective, I really do think that the leaders that I was working with at Nuveen were very much on board and, allies, in making sure that there were different voices around the table, that we were making sure that we were, hiring, the best person for the job, but we had diverse candidate slates being presented, and that we were sponsoring the right events, that we were thinking about social mobility, that we were thinking about women in leadership, and that we had the right programs to really push that forward.
Oh, that's fantastic. And when you say all this, what comes to my mind is culture and cultural alignment, because in the context of the organization operated, across different regions, and in the context that the people there were altruistic, it feels to me that you found a real home for your talent. Because again, being nosy as I am, I should have been a private investigator. I know that as active as your life has been, notwithstanding young family, all of that sort of stuff, you've had a number of roles that I would call, I don't know if it's supernumerary or voluntary. That's the word I'm looking for, voluntary. So just, what's the audit committee chair for the Creative Education Foundation? Is that something that's happening still?
Yeah, so the Creative Education Foundation, they're US based, and I accepted the role on the board 3 months before I found out I was moving to London. And so, really tried to make the time zones work, and they were great. And I really got a lot of great experience, because the committees would rotate. So, I mean, as part of the finance committee, the audit committee, the governance and nominating committee. And I think I learned so much. In fact, I think I probably learned more than what I was able to give back. But, it was a really great experience. And they weren't a charity, they were not for profit. So what they would do, if you can imagine Greenbelt, that drive methodology, like how do we do things in business and problem solve and solution in a more kind of, seamless way. They were doing the same thing using creativity to do it. And so I thought that was fascinating. And then, my work with the Sundara Fund, which actually was a charity out in India. For me, that was one of the highlights of, kind of like, a few years ago, and helping. We co-founded a thing called Rise 100, where we were giving grants to women that were doing innovative, solutioning in their communities when it came to water preservation or hygiene. And just to get to hear some of those stories and the impact that they were making, I mean, it was truly inspiring. And it just made me realize, like, there's so much greatness out there, and they just need a little bit of support when they're in a country where the support's not exactly being provided.
Yeah, no, brilliant. And we could go on, because there's the 30% Club mentoring role that you had there, and other sort of things that you've done. And I love to ask, one, how the hell did you find the time to do all these other things while you got a job? And two, I guess, what was the driving force behind, let me support folks over in India, or help women, or on the creative side, like let me, my word, help other people outside of my day-to-day job?
And to be fully transparent, and this is actually advice that I give, people kind of just coming up. I wish I had done it earlier. So I started giving back when I was around 30, and I had moved from New York to Boston for a few years. My husband had been moved over to a different company to serve as the chief marketing officer. It was a huge role. I was pregnant at the time. It's the dead of winter. I know nobody in Boston. And he was the one that was like, why don't you find a way to give back? Like, why don't you join Junior League or, volunteer at a hospital? And so I did a little research. I joined the Junior League, and then I joined Make-A-Wish, their committees. And I joined the Beacon Hill Women's Forum. And so for me, it was a way to give back and make friends. And then I realized that giving back was actually something that really got me motivated to really do more of it, and see the impact firsthand on what I, could solve. And in the meantime, I'm meeting amazing people too. And my network expanded and really good things started to happen to me. So I think it's just like that karma. I didn't do it to get something in return, but opportunities came to me just by doing that. And I just think I had so much time in my 20s. Why wasn't I doing this before? And so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a wonderful answer to, the why and the rationale behind it. And it speaks to me because similarly, like I sit on the board of trustees for my local Age UK and volunteer with them and have done CSR things over the years. And I didn't put it together probably until last year, that the moments when I felt the most happiest have not been like personal achievement per se, but to your point, when I've given my time, energy, resources, there's usually a physical challenge involved, but the impact it's had on other people who perhaps weren't gifted or blessed with the opportunities that I had, and so I often say giving for me is living, and we don't know what we don't know. So I kind of say to you, if ever it comes up, I sometimes feel like in life, as we journey, when we as students are ready, then the teachers do appear, because in our 20s, I don't know, man, maybe going outside drinking with my buddies would have been more of a thing. So I wouldn't have heard the calling. So that's just me. I'm not speaking for you. That's just me. So yeah, does that make sense?
There's that mentality where in your 20s, you're working so hard, trying to rise, climb that ladder. And, trying to balance that in the few hours that you have left, like you want to be with your friends or go to the gym or do something for you. And I think what I realized, having 2 young kids, having a, crazy job, there's always time, you make time for the things that truly matter. And 100%. Then you look back and you're like, I don't know how I did it. It didn't seem impossible at the time, but you know what they say, if you want something done, give it to a busy person. And that's definitely the case here.
I think so. There's something like when you go to the gym and at first you try and lift a weight or run a distance on treadmill and you're just gasping. And I relate it back to being like children, like babies. When you see babies, they can do nothing. And then within 6 to 9 months, they start to do the crawling thing. Then they start to try and get up, and they fail so often in that process, but they're relentless in the pursuit and the playfulness of that goal. And I think that's much like your journey for me, where you've played, you've enjoyed, you've said yes, despite not knowing. And obviously, I think not being at the pinnacle of your powers when you join, you've gone in there and learned quickly. And then from crawling to walking to running to flying, that journey happens in the moment. So kudos to you. And hopefully some people take some encouragement from this, that don't figure it all out. Just have the direction and the vehicle will appear, unicorn or otherwise,
Yep. What's the saying? Like when you're planning for your life is actually happening.
Yeah.
Or something
100%.
like that. Something a little more profound than that statement.
I get it. So when I come back to your career, because before it was trending, your role included the elements of diversity involvement, and you've shared a bit about how that came about. And I suppose what interests me about that is what led you, because I've got my views. I want to ask the question, what led you to sort of stay in that area and continue to grow in it? Because you could have had other opportunities with all the things that skills you developed. You could have moved into other areas, but you stayed there. You stayed in diversity, equity, and inclusion. So what was it about that area that kind of captured your imagination and your working time?
I think it was just having that purpose-driven or mission-driven career, knowing that it may not be something that I see tomorrow or even 5 years from now, but just those small incremental steps that you're making, to help an organization have more voices around the table, or to have a place where employees feel like they belong, like the business resource groups, where they can come to work and they know that they're not the only one, and that they have allies that support them, and that there's just so many positive impacts that can come around creating an equitable and inclusive environment. And, of course, the business outcome is what really matters for the businesses. Like, how does this lead to the bottom line? What's the innovation that comes? And you can read every McKinsey study under the book and it will prove that to you. But at the end of the day, it makes a great place to work. And want to be surrounded by people at their job that are fun to be around, that are happy, that aren't sitting around the water cooler griping about like their day and their leadership and, how terrible the company is. And just having, an inclusive approach, like it creates for better benefits where people are happy. Like, for example, Nuveen had a backup childcare benefit that benefited everybody that had children. So for 15 days out of the year, when your kid's on break or they're sick, you can still work because someone's going to pay for a childcare or a center to help you with your child. And so that takes off so much stress. So just those little benefits, which was recommended from our working parents group, just contributes to a more inclusive place. And so for me, it's creating a place where everyone wants to come to work, where I want to come to work. And then also the hopefully longer term impact where in 5 or 10 years from now, unlike me, when I was starting off in my 20s and I was the only female in a room full of hedge fund founders and the executives, I don't want my daughter to have to deal with that 20 years from now and think, this is really weird. Can I talk? Or am I going to be told to sit down and be quiet?
Yeah. That connects. And yeah, again, I think I share some of the sentiments with you there, because 3 children, 2 daughters, my mission isn't just what is good for them. Clearly it is, but if I see your daughter as my daughter, everyone else in the world's daughters, I would want the best possible conditions for all women, irrespective of whether they're related to me by blood or not. And that's the same with all of the, different protected groups that you have under the sort of DE&I umbrella. And I love this idea that, like an empathetic leader who is inclusive isn't just good for one constituency, but really is great for all, because they meet people where they're at, they encourage them to be authentic, and they craft a mission and a vision that people want to get behind and try. Because I don't know if you've ever done it, but I know people that have. I'm not saying myself. They've been in a role and they've just done what they need to do. But when you really, really believe in where the company's going and who you're working with, and you really want it to do well, like there's some sort of Red Bull inspired turbocharging thing that goes on where you're not like, okay, it's 4:45 now, I'm leaving in 10 minutes. It's like, I will do what I need to do to move us forward because I believe in what I'm here to do. And I feel good being where I am,
Absolutely.
So that is fantastic. That's fantastic. Now, we've talked a lot about the versatility in your career, and I wanted to know, just by way of sharing any hints, tips, tricks with anybody listening to this down the line, what tools, if any, have you used to sort of elevate yourself along the journey? As the new challenges have appeared, can you cast your mind back and think of any tools that have been particularly helpful?
I think it just goes back to saying yes. That was my tool. Just say yes. And if you say yes, then you get accepted, then you better hurry and study and become a quick study and prove to them that they asked you for a reason and that you said yes because you're really going to show up and do the work.
That does make sense. And when you say about the quick study and learning quickly, what ways would you assimilate information? Say you move from investor relations to supplier management, like what sorts of methods would you use to kind of assimilate that knowledge as fast as you could?
Oh, it's definitely the power of human connection. Who are your stakeholders? Who are your colleagues? Who's been there before you? And just have a coffee, sit down, tell me about yourself. What do you do? What advice do you have for me for this role? Are there any books or conferences or certifications I need to be successful? I think it's part like individual study, but also studying the people around you that will help you be successful.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I love that, which is why I think COVID for me was a tricky one, because especially for people starting out their careers, not being able to go into an office and have those almost organic interactions and conversations, it all became about let's schedule time rather than, oh, I see you at the water cooler and your energy feels about right, so maybe I will ask you the question, I won't ask you, so that was a tough time. But actually, while I'm at it, I'm just thinking, I never covered this with you in terms of the leadership role that you had. There can be various types. So subject matter leader, and then there's people leader, and a combination of both. Where did you sit on that spectrum?
So I mean, I got really lucky early on when I was waiting tables. I was asked, do you want to train people? Do you want to be kind of an assistant manager and help with the scheduling? I said, yes, I'll open, I'll close, I'll do that. I think it gave me $1 more an hour. It wasn't like a big, pay bump. And then when I went into these corporate roles, I was at small companies. And so, the CEO and the president and the lawyer wasn't going to be managing the office manager. They weren't going to be managing the intern. So I got the opportunity to do that. And then as I kept growing at my career in TIAA, the function kept growing. And so I kept growing. And then we kept having more kind of entry-level people come and join. And so I got the opportunity to lead them. And I think one of the things that was kind of a eye-opening thing for me, because, when you're an individual contributor, it's like, okay, how do I show up? What is my version of success? How is my manager looking at me? And when you become a leader, it's really, okay, how do I pass this down so my employees can do this so we can all look good? And I got some kind of difficult feedback maybe 6 or 7 years ago. And it was from a woman who I absolutely adore and I still keep in touch with. And she sat me down. She goes, Melissa, can I give you some feedback? And it's like, oh gosh, the dreaded feedback sandwich. What is she going to tell me? And she was like, I think it'd be really important for you and your team if maybe you lead by letting others lead. Don't be so quick to assign things out. Don't be so quick to take it upon yourself. Like, maybe get some other ideas from other people. Maybe let people volunteer. Maybe let them bring what they think, their vision to the table. And that was such critical advice for me because I never thought about it like that. And that definitely, shaped the way that I approach leadership. And I think the success of the team is so much more profound when it comes from everybody and not just the leader.
This is my jam. This is my jam. In coaching parlance, we call this the co-creation.
Yes.
We call it co-creation, and it's holding the space for others to share what they think and what they feel. And I kid you not, I think it's changed my life. I think it's changed my life insofar as in my earlier roles, and maybe similar to yours, I was consulting, and as I grew more senior, people would come to me for my expertise in solving their problems. And I realized later down the line, now I've done the coaching diploma, that I was not listening to really understand, but I was listening to respond.
Yes.
You hear me?
Yes, that.
Just so I'm waiting for you to stop talking so I could tell you what I think is the answer to your thing. And what percentage of stuff you said that I didn't hear, what body language you were displaying that I didn't pick up on because I'd already gone into processing, how do I get you out of this problem that I think I understand, but I haven't checked that I understand, was wild. Was that something you nodded like, you know what I'm talking about there?
Absolutely. And I think it's human nature until you train your mind differently to not respond that way, to listen more, to think like, I don't have all the problem or I don't have all the solutions. Why am I waiting for them to stop talking so I can tell them what the solution is when they might be telling me what that solution is and it's better than the one that I was thinking of?
Yeah, no, you're so right. And it is incredibly powerful. Like why I say it's changed my life, it applies across all sort of my relationships, but the main one is with my children. So doing the solo parent, co-parenting thing, when they're with me, there's 3 of them and there's 1 of me, and we will talk without me saying what the plan is about what does everyone have on the agenda for the weekend, how they like it to go, how they see it working. And then we co-create this really beautiful thing where my eldest, my son, will say, well, how about if I stay with the youngest and then you drop the middle one, and then when you come back, then I can go do my thing. And then and we put it all together. And what I've found is there is less passive aggressive resistance to the orders, because I think deep down, Melissa, we all want to be free. Whether you get paid or you make your own money, we want freedom. And I think it starts from young, and why sometimes we rebel. But that co-creation has saved me so much stress and come up with, I hate to admit it, but it's the truth, better ideas than I would ever have come up with thinking, you know, I'm a parent, I'm going to tell them how it's done. Like, they really bring the magic to the table. So yes to that for kids, but also corporate and professional personal relationships as well, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah, now I'm keeping an eye on the time because I'm mindful that our plane is at a serious cruising altitude, but in about 240 seconds, you and I both have other things. So I'm just thinking about what I can ask you, what I should ask you. I think you've shared a lot of things, but one of the things I want to touch upon is we find ourselves in incredibly interesting times right now. And if you had one wish, only one, because of time, what would that be, you know, for the future of the world as a whole? Small question, really easy one.
Okay, that's an easy one. I think it would be that the world can continue to evolve into an inclusive place and not go backward. That everyone has the opportunity just to be their authentic self, to not hide certain parts because the government's saying, well, you don't have this right anymore. I want business, I want the future of business to really embrace the innovation and the business solutions and outcomes that come from having everyone at the table and not just, you know, one type of person. Yeah, I just think that's the most important way to just continue to shape the way forward, whether it's in society or in personal community or in the business world.
That is a good answer to a juicy question. That was my Louis Theroux side coming in there, just a bit of an edge. And I think in terms of, if you were to go back in time and say anything to your younger self, is there anything that you would say now that you've been through the journey to this point?
Yeah, I would definitely say you've got this. Don't worry. Don't worry so much. Put your goals in place. Find the people who are going to support you along the way. Make sure you give it back tenfold when people need you and your support, and just realize that anything is possible. You just have to do it. It sounds so cliche, but it's cliche because it's true.
That is fabulous. One last question, because I think you've done so well being concise. I can't do this. But in terms of future aspirations for you personally, I know that you're in that phase of exploring new avenues and opportunities. You can do so many things, so many things. Where do your future aspirations lie in terms of the types of things that you'd most like to be engaged in doing, really?
Yeah, I think, you know, with my background, anything in that space, whether it's investor relations, the communications, the marketing, definitely the inclusion work, the corporate social responsibility work. But for me, it's just, I think bottom line, I need to continue to engage in work that generates that positive impact. How it can, help communities continue to kind of grow and thrive in a more equitable space. I think, of course, I'm deeply passionate about the work that I've done in inclusion and CSR, but to me, it's like, if that work shifts or varies a bit, as long as the organization where I'm at does have that mindset, that's kind of my future aspirations, to find a company that is still focused on that.
Yeah, and I think with your compass being so strong, you won't have any problem discovering where is for you and where isn't for you going forward. And I will continue to do whatever it is that I can to connect you with fellow tribes people, because more is needed, definitely not less. But thank you so much for this. We've managed to do it bang on time so that we can get on to our other conversations. But yeah, I can't wait to catch up with you and see what happens next for you, really, Melissa. Thank you.
Absolutely, same. Thank you again, Kofi. It's been such a pleasure to chat with you, and I look forward to connecting again soon.
All right, amazing stuff, good stuff, and we'll speak soon. All right, all the
I hope
best.
so. Take good care.